Welcome to the class, students. I'm Savinaya, delivering a lecture on Renaissance. Through this class, we are going to find an answer for the two constructive questions. The first question: summarize the Renaissance and identify why it started in Italy. And the second question: what are the salient features of the Renaissance? So we'll find an answer for these two questions through this class. What will we learn from this class? The first question: what is the Renaissance? I'm going to talk about the Renaissance and why Italy, why it originated in Italy. We'll find the reasons. And the third question, it's about classical and worldly view towards the Renaissance. The Renaissance in Europe is the great movement which brought about the awakening of new interest in the old classics. As I said, it originated in the Italy in the 14th to 15th century and brought about a transition from faith to reason, from dogma to science. Literally, the term Renaissance means rebirth, and it signified the revival of the study of old classics. It was basically an enthusiastic study of the masterpieces of ancient Latin and Greek literature with a new interest. So, a new outlook was developed in the realm of thought and action. So, the educated people hope to bring back to life the culture of classical Greece and Rome. In the broad sense, the Renaissance stood for an all-round development as well as widening of horizons. There was a fresh realization that the world is full of interest and beauty. The Renaissance also gave rise to curiosity and the growth of the spirit of inquiry, which resulted in great discontent with the medieval spirit. Through its bold approach, the Renaissance encouraged an intellectual revolt against the rigid rules and traditions of the medieval period. The greatest service rendered by the Renaissance was the release of the human mind and the birth of the original thinking. So maybe this led to rapid progress in all spheres of activity. It also led to several movements which took place simultaneously, such as the rise of new political order, geographical discoveries, and the Reformation movement, which ushered in the modern times. So let's now talk about the causes of the Renaissance. Many causes led to the success of the Renaissance movement. Ideas that were not based on reason could not continue indefinitely. The clergy in the church, in actual practice, acted contrary to the principles of true Christianity that they preached. This undermined faith in the ideas of the universal church and the universal empire. Original thinkers such as Roger Bacon and Peter Abelard managed to weaken the intellectual authority of the church by blazing new trails. Peter Abelard felt that it was essential to apply reasons to the principles given in the scriptures. In his opinion, the mysteries of Christianity were not to be taken for granted. They had to be tested in the light of reason and investigation. Another revolutionary thinker was Roger Bacon. He criticized Aristotle and the church severely. He accepted from the past whatever was reasonable and worked potentially as well as patiently for the cause of the new spirit. He had the foresight to anticipate several modern invasions and wrote about the possibility of having ships without rowers, vehicles without draught animals, and flying machines. However, owing to their bold approach and original thinking, both of these thinkers were persecuted by the church. The second cause is about the fall of Constantinople, which led to a widespread and systematic study of Greek heritage. After this great center of classical civilization and culture fell into hands of the Ottoman Turks, Greek scholars fled to various parts of Europe, where they diffused the great ideas of ancient Greece. Thus, an enthusiasm in the study of the classics was injected into the minds of the Europeans. A rapid spread of ideas was possible by the introduction of the printing press. In the middle of the 15th century, Johannes Gutenberg was successful in operating the first printing press at Mainz in Germany. In 1456, the first book was printed in. Compared to manuscripts, which were available to only a select few, printed books were easy and cheap to produce. This ensured widespread dissemination of ideas among masses. Also, at the same time, literature started to be written in local languages like German, French, Spanish, Italian, English, etc., thereby increasing its spread among commoners who could not understand Greek or Latin, the dominant literature languages of the time. Next, new ideas were brought to Europe owing to the Crusades, which brought about contact with the Arabs and other peoples in the East. Voyages were conducted to new countries by adventurers. The geographical explorers and travelers felt that it was essential to absorb the ideas of the East and also to create new ideas. Their voyages of exploration and discovery led to a wealth and prosperity as well as to a broader vision. The great role was played by progressive kings and popes in fostering the new Renaissance. Some of the nobles and rich merchants also patronized art and scholarships. For example, artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci were patronized by the brilliant Medici family of Florence. Indeed, the most generous patrons of artists and men of letters in Europe were the heads of great Florentine banking firms like the Medici. The Medici paid to build a massive domed cathedral for Florence. Next, let's find an answer for the second aspect which we need to discuss about why it originated in Italy. Let's talk about the origin of the Renaissance. The Renaissance had its origin in Italy, where it blossomed and later spread to the other countries of Europe. There were several causes leading to the origin of the Renaissance in Italy, which became the school of Europe in the Renaissance. Scholarly refuses, such as the Greeks played an important role in stimulating the movement after they settled in Italy on fleeing from Constantinople in 1453. The Italian cities grew very rich by controlling the distribution of Asian goods on the European continent. The love of learning was fostered by the rich merchant princes of the Italian cities, who competed with each other in patronizing learning, art, and science. Rome soon became a great center of civilization, culture, art, learning, and literature, while Florence and Venice became the leading cities of the Renaissance. Italy was regarded as the seat of the great power and glory of the ancient Romans, since it contained the ruins of ancient Rome. Further, the Italian language was closest to the classical Latin language. So, as I said, many artists, Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, uh, many artists uh, have patronizing learning and art and science. Next, we'll talk about the features of the Renaissance. The characteristics of Renaissance were humanism, nationalism, a new approach to life, and a new spirit in art, architecture, literature, and learning, the growth of the vernaculars and scientific investigations. Let's talk about humanism. The Renaissance scholars were known as humanists, and their subjects of study came to be called the Humanites. Petrarch is regarded as the father of humanism. This movement could be regarded for the turning away from the medieval traditions of asceticism and theology towards an interest in man's life on this earth. The works of Renaissance scholars were permitted with the faith that man with an active mind and body is capable of knowing and controlling the world. Next, let's talk about the rational spirit and scientific investigation. The rise of the rational spirit and of scientific investigation gave rise to a new approach to life, whereas the medieval approach was one of absolute conformity and obedience. The new approach was based on reason. It laid emphasis on the importance of critical examination and evaluation of ideas and principles. Now let's talk about the literature. During the medieval age, all the important writing was done in Latin, which was the language of the church. The cultured people generally looked down upon the European vernaculars. However, in the 13th century, Dante wrote the Divine Comedy in Italian rather than Latin. This great Italian poet is regarded as the link between the medieval and the modern world. With this began an era of development of vernacular literature. Dante's example was soon followed by others. Thus, Petrarch wrote a series of love sonnets. He roused the interest of the people in the great works of Virgil, Cicero, and others. Machiavelli wrote his historical works and his Prince as a guide for rulers. Boccaccio, Ariosto, Tasso were other Italian writers of the period. Even in England, Sir Thomas More's Utopia appeared in English in 1551. English literature flowered through Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales, Milton's Paradise Lost, and the dramas of the immortal Shakespeare. A great contribution was made to German literature by Martin Luther by translating the Bible. Spanish literature flourished with the works of several genius minds. Similarly, there were considerable development in the fields of Dutch, Portuguese, and French literature. So now let's talk about the architecture. The spirit of revival was evident in the field of art too. Some of the distinctive features of Renaissance architecture were round Roman arches, rows of Greek columns, Oriental domes, and Islamic decoration. Gothic architecture with its pointed arches and flying buttresses was discarded. The great cities of Europe were adorned with great churches and cathedrals like St. Paul's at London, St. Peter's at Rome, and St. Mark's at Venice. The highest expression of Renaissance architecture was reached under the direction of great architects like Raphael, Michelangelo by designing the vast Basilica of St. Peter in Rome, and also under Leonardo da Vinci through his beautifully designed buildings at Milan, Pavia, and other cities. In France, kings like Francis first admired the classical style in building, resulting in public structures such as the celebrated Palace of the Louvre, which now houses one of the world's largest art collections. In Spain, classical architecture received encouragement after 1550 from King Philip II, while in England, the famous architect Jones designed the classical banquet house in Whitehall in 1619. Now let's focus our discussion on the sculpture. Humanism was reflected in Italian sculpture in the 14th century. During the 16th century, the new sculpture spread in Western Europe as Italian sculptors were invited by Henry VII to England, as well as by Francis I to France. The tomb of Ferdinand and Isabella in Spain was carved on classical lines. And next, painting. The change in painting was even more striking than in sculpture. Before the 16th century, most of the paintings were um, which are pictures made directly on plaster walls or on wooden panels. However, in the 16th century, uh, painting detached pictures on canvas, wood, or other materials developed, while the art of oil painting was mastered. In the Renaissance wave, world was a place of beauty and delight. The artists concentrated their effort on the physical aspects of man's existence rather than that of the religious. Four of the world's greatest painters, as I mentioned, Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, flourished in Italy during the 16th century. The new painting uh, soon spread from Italy to become the heritage of all Western Europe. Francis first took Italian painters to France, where they trained French painters. Philip II encouraged painting in Spain, so painted uh, magnificently in all Western Europe. Next, music. The golden age of Renaissance music began in the 16th century when the crude musical instrument of the Middle Age took on modern forms and sweeter tones. The harsh rebec was replaced by the violin and piano. The Roman school of music produced the master composer Palestrina, who is rightly called the father of modern church music. So the other aspects which we can discuss about science. The spirits of inquiry created by the Renaissance movement led to a great progress in science. In the 13th century, Roger Bacon laid the foundations of modern science by insisting on the experimental method and discovered the uses of gunpowder and the magnifying lens. Next, Nicholas Copernicus of Poland revolutionized the thought of mankind by proving that the earth moves around the sun. The Copernican theory was upheld by the Italian astronomer Galileo and the German astronomer John Kepler. John Kepler improved upon the Copernican theory by showing that the planets go round the sun in an elliptical orbit. Galileo made important advances in physics through experiments and observations like those of falling objects, pendulum, and telescopes. Sir Isaac Newton discovered the laws of gravitation governing the movements of the planets round the sun, as also that of the moon round the earth. So, the age of Renaissance also witnessed several inventions and discoveries, such as that of the printing press, which was of immense importance. The invention of the mariner's compass helped in the progress of foreign trade. Thus, the foundation of modern science was firmly laid in the age of the Renaissance. So, now let's talk about the consequences of the Renaissance. The Renaissance led to significant results. It brought about a transition from the medieval to the modern age. The period witnessed the end of the old and reactionary medieval spirit and the beginning of the new spirit of science, reason, and experimentation. The hands of the monarchy was strengthened. The culture of the Europeans was enriched. However, the Renaissance weakened the church, which could not occupy the position of unquestioned authority it had possessed during the medieval period. The Renaissance gave a great impetus to the art, architecture, learning, and literature, which reached tremendous heights. It also created a reverence for antiquity and a great respect for the ancient Greek and Roman classics. Further, the Renaissance led to the creation of humanism, that is, focus on man and his world instead of theology. So, Renaissance gave a stimulus to the growth of vernacular literature. As a result, the Italian, French, German, Spanish, and English language blossomed at that time. And also, the Protestant Reformation movement was also strengthened by the Renaissance. It resulted in far reaching scientific inventions and geographical discoveries. The study of history was made more critical and scientific owing to the development of a more critical spirit demanding accuracy and the discovery of many historical manuscripts. So, students, Renaissance is one of the great movement which brought about the awakening of new interest in the old classics. As I said, it was basically an enthusiastic study of the masterpieces of ancient Latin and Greek literature with a new interest. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you have understand the concept of Renaissance.